Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bitcoin News Show right here on the World Crypto Network. Thanks so much, guys, for joining us on another beautiful Sunday afternoon with the blue skies out here. We'll be talking about Bitcoin, our lovely, lovely ritual we love to do every Sunday. Got a lot of things to talk about today, guys. We got Lightning progress, Robinhood, Weiss ratings, and of course, my personal favorite topic, we'll be talking about simplicity from Dr. Russell himself. So let's go ahead before we get into the introductions and just get a few announcements out of the way. I just really wanted to thank my Twitter followers this week. I had a lot of conversation over Twitter this week, and I just want to thank my followers for jumping in there with really helpful things like helpful links, helpful refutals, all sorts of great things with videos. I mean, it was just great. I just really want to thank my followers so much for helping me out there. I can't fight the world alone, so it's really great to have you guys come in and give us some links. So really appreciate that. Just want to say thanks so much to my followers. And then SegWit today. Looks like SegWit adoption is over 18%, a record all-time high. So very excited to see that, guys. Check that out at segwit.party. Very excited to see that. And let's see what else. It looks like we had the World Economic Forum recently this week talked about Bitcoin at Davos. And I just want to read out a couple of tweets that people kind of responded with, because it was really great how the community basically responded to it, because they tried to do a lot of FUD, a lot of fear about crypto and things like that. So let me just read a couple of the tweets that the community replied with. This one's from Bill Gross. Bitcoin's rise may reflect, for better or worse, a monumental transfer of social trust away from human institutions backed by government and to systems reliant on well-tested computer code. So very cool. Got one from Max Kaiser. Those at Davos threatened by Bitcoin maybe could have thwarted the revolution 5 years ago, but now it's too late. Go home, guys. Your time is over. So just really awesome, very bullish replies and rebuttals to some of the threats that they made over there at Davos from about cryptocurrencies at the World Economic Forum. So just really great to see the community react. Really great. It's far too late to stop this, guys. Crypto is here to stay. We have definitely opened Pandora's box here. And then finally, looks like crypto might be going a bit more mainstream than we kind of thought, because this week we saw both 50 Cent, some news from 50 Cent and Katy Perry. It looks like 50 Cent sort of forgot about all of those Bitcoin earnings from the album in 2014, Animal Ambition. It looks like he took a second look, and he's got millions and millions of dollars. So that was really cool. And then, of course, Katy Perry decided to tweet out, or on her Instagram, actually, a photograph of her nails, all with crypto logos on them. In fact, probably a better rating system than Weiss, but we'll get to that later on. Very interesting stuff. So with the announcements aside, let's go to the introductions and introduce these panelists who I'm super proud to have you guys talk to. Really hope we have an amazing conversation today. And with all these guys, it looks like we're gonna. So let's first introduce Mr. Dan Robinson over there at Chain. Dan, how you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me on again, Vortex.
You bet. Really glad to have you on again, Dan. Last time we had him on, we talked about Ivy, the smart contract IDE. Very cool for programming Bitcoin smart contracts. With us again, we have Mr. Francis Pulio from Cadillacsy.com. Francis, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me again.
Awesome, man. Over there in Canada, thanks so much for joining us. For the first time, ladies and gentlemen, from BTC Threats and Block Digest, we have the great JW joining us. How you doing, man?
Good. Yeah, thanks for having me. This is a lot of fun.
You bet. Yeah, we're really glad to have you. Really enjoy all your commentary and stuff over there at Block Digest. Really appreciate your contributions to the community with btcthreats.com. So just a pleasure to finally have you on here. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, our very special guest, Mr. Dr. Russell from Blockstream. How you doing, Dr. Russell?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on your show.
Really appreciate you taking the time. I know there's a whole lot of buzz about smart contracts and things like that around the crypto community. So really glad to have you here talking about simplicity for Bitcoin, because I really think that's going to be a sleeper. I think a whole lot of people are underestimating the power of simplicity. So we're going to get into that. Without further ado, let's go into our first topic of the day, Lightning. Right, so Lightning continuing to take the world by storm. It looks like every single day, more and more nodes, more and more connections. We're looking at I haven't even checked the last stat, but it seems to be growing about 40% per day. We had both Charge and Strike released these different API libraries. One for open source, and then one for a custodial-like service, like Stripe. And then we also had the first physical item purchased over Lightning. And again, it just keeps growing like crazy. We've had people even experiment with putting Lightning nodes on Raspberry Pi. So I got all these links, guys, right in the show notes. So definitely check that out. Don't forget to do that. But let me ask you, Dr. Russell, first, what do you think about all the progress on Lightning so far? Is it happening faster than you think that it would have? And are these people really reckless? Are we being too reckless over there? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think it's going along faster than I expected. With Lightning is a very important part of Bitcoin. I studied Bitcoin, back in 2011 for the first time, and then I sort of got disinterested in it because it has scaling problems that many people are aware of. And it was really Lightning, the prospect of Lightning, that really got me back into my interest of Bitcoin, because finally we have a way that we can support a vast number of transactions that ordinary people can still verify and get their financial autonomy.
Absolutely. I think it took me a little bit by storm too. I really didn't expect it to take off so fast. I certainly didn't expect all this experimentation so fast anyway. So this is really great to see. Let's go with JW. What do you think about this progress with Lightning? Is it happening faster than you think? And again, are we moving too fast? Are we as reckless as some say that we are?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I mean, when I wrote the Bitcoin threat model a few months ago, one of the threats is obviously spam attacks, right? And being able to make the network unusable and it, be relatively cost effective to do so. And when I wrote that, I said, look, there's really two safeguards. It's side chains, two safeguards we know of that are on the way, right? Side chains and Lightning Network. And I don't think it's a coincidence that now that Lightning Network is up and people are using it, that the spam attacks have ended, right? Because it's just no longer cost effective. It's not a cost effective narrative. So yes, some people are losing some money in Lightning channels. Hopefully it's sticker dollar amounts. And yes, somebody might be more reckless than everybody's recommending, and the banners that are everywhere saying, hey, don't put a lot of money into the channel. But you got to look at the counter side of that, and that is that a lot of people are saving a lot of money on fees right now, and I would be willing to bet that we're suffering a lot less with a little bit of recklessness on Lightning than we would be without it.
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, it seems that we're much better with all this experimentation than without it. Even though the devs, of course, would like a little bit more time, to without having to worry about all these people being all reckless. But we definitely thank them for the work, and we hope we don't interrupt them too much. But really, the amount of bugs that we're going to find, Samson Mao even tweeted that, this is just absolutely great because the amount of bugs we're going to find is going to happen much faster. We'll be able to actually, get through it much quicker. And so maybe get this to production ready much quicker. And so, I mean, I have to agree with them. That's definitely my opinion. Let's ask Francis. Francis, what do you think about all this Lightning progress? I mean, we had Charge released, right? Strike released. Maybe you can have some comments on those. And in general, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I was super happy with a lot of stuff being released last week. There's two other things that you didn't mention. Is that Eclair, I think, released their wallet, and also Zap released, which is kind of like the Windows compiler, and to make it easy for people to download. So I'm not surprised at the interest, at the speed of development of Lightning, because the interest and demand is so overwhelming. And the people who are supporting Lightning are anybody really that has a business model that depends on Bitcoin. Ultimately supports Lightning and wants Lightning to succeed as fast as possible. So the vision and the narrative of Lightning is extremely compelling. And as I said a few times, I really think that this is kind of like the first real Bitcoin 2.0. In the sense that there's an opportunity for a lot of people to get in onto Lightning first and have their products become the new blockchain.infos of Lightning, or the new Coinbase of Lightning, or the new whatever of Lightning. So that's why you'll see everybody kind of rushing to release one after the other those software. So one of the things that I noticed starting to integrate Lightning is that we really need to have more and continuous infrastructure for Lightning. So far we have a lot of neat things. So I tweeted about this last week. There's Charge, and there's there's the other one is Strike. These are two things that we want to have in Lightning and that we want to continue to develop. So Charge by Blockstream is essentially a web development toolkit which allows developers to better connect themselves to the Lightning Network and to manage their channels and to receive notifications directly into their app. So that allows a lot of developers to build applications, not just websites that are accepting payments, but like actual applications on Lightning. And then you have Strike, which is, I think, really clever. It's essentially a payment processor for Lightning Network, where basically async is receiving Lightning payments on behalf of merchants. And as a merchant, it's kind of like BitPay. You have like a dashboard, and then they're receiving all sorts of Lightning payments in your account. And then at some point, when you want to withdraw that as an on-chain transaction, like you set a threshold. So it's a custodian solution where async is basically in custody of your Lightning Network coins until you withdraw. But I think it's pretty clever because a lot of people might not have the skill or right now the tools to manage their own Lightning Network channels. So I think the health of the infrastructure ecosystem is fantastic. I think there's all sorts of incentives for that to continue. And I feel like right now we're kind of like at Bitcoin in 2010, because I haven't really been able to run like a Lightning mainnet node, and I've tried. And it's really, really hard for most people to use. But like we're gonna get the speed at which we got from like 2010 to 2014 with all sorts of wallets and block explorers and Lightning, I think is, instead of taking like 4 years, I think it's gonna take like, a year or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, the progress is moving so fast. That seems about right. I mean, that's kind of what I predicted is by the end of this year, basically going into early 2019, every major crypto business will have this integrated somehow, some way. And, there's some talk about Andreas saying that Coinbase might not implement Lightning because they have to do KYC on everything. And Lightning is, in fact, by default encrypted. So maybe you could comment on that, Francis, of what do you think real quick about maybe companies like Coinbase who are heavily KYC'd integrating Lightning?
Well, I do understand kind of the theoretical concerns, because in a really, really kind of strict technical understanding of a payment channel, you could say that to some degree, like a hub is at some point partially in custody of some Bitcoins. Although to me, that argument completely doesn't make sense, because at any point, the Bitcoin blockchain is the arbiter of that ultimately, and that you're relaying funds. And I think the problem is taking the fee, right, and having a business model of relaying funds. But ultimately, that's no different for me than mining. And I really don't buy into the idea that people will be able to censor Lightning nodes. I mean, people can already censor Bitcoin nodes. Technically, you can force someone to not run, can prevent someone from running a node. But it is true that under some strict interpretations of MSB rules, and with a lot of creativity you really must want to kind of apply that to Lightning, it would be unenforceable. And anyway, so I really don't think that's I think that's a load of FUD, to be honest. I don't buy that argument.
Yep, and we're going to ask Dan about that too, because I think he had some comments. Dan, being a bit of a lawyer, maybe a bit of an expert on law himself. It's really good points though, Francis. About the competitive advantage. If you are a Bitcoin company, and you are a smaller company than some of the other larger ones out there, this is an amazing way to have a competitive advantage. And of course, again, Lightning will allow all these instant decentralized atomic swaps. So we actually won't even need things like Coinbase most likely in the future once we're already in crypto. Obviously, for fiat, we still need those on-ramps and off-ramps. But let's ask Daniel. Let me ask you, Dan, first, what are your thoughts on the incredible speed that Lightning seems to be developing at? And then maybe your thoughts on this idea of Lightning nodes being able to have the idea of them maybe being able to be regulated as money transmission, as money transmitters. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to concur with everyone else that I think the adoption or the speed of technical development on it went from sort of relatively slow and steady over the course of a few years to recently. I think it's been really great, and I think the amount of this attention that it's gotten has helped really spur a lot of people adopting it. When again, maybe the developers would probably rather they wait But I think it's good, honestly, for people to be, as long as they're willing, they know they're putting their money in potentially at risk, to be trying it out on mainnet and just sort of hacking on it. That's part of just like the hacker ethos. I think it's cool that people are doing things, that people are using the software and building it. So I'm also extremely optimistic about how Lightning goes in the long run. I'm also really happy about how I think it's going to spur a lot of further development. There are some changes that can be made to Bitcoin script that could really improve the efficiency of Lightning channels and networks. So Lowry from Lightning gave a talk on this at a conference that Russell and I were at this week, and generally there's some improvements that can be made, and I think it's a good incentive to add these features, and that can really drive further development in it. As to the money services business question and the legal questions about Lightning, that's something. It's a really interesting question. It's something that Coin Center has come out with. They had some work on sort of studying this question and arguing that Lightning nodes shouldn't be considered money transmitters because they don't actually have control over the funds in the way required under the law. It's not an area of law that I practice or am particularly well aware of, although I've tried to stay up to date on it because it has such an effect. It would ultimately, in the long run, it would surprise me. It would certainly disappoint me. And while I wouldn't say it's necessarily unenforceable, I think there's ways that even if it were to happen and the U.S. government were to FinCEN were to classify Lightning nodes as money transmitters, two things is one is there are a lot of money transmitters in the United States, and some of them include Bitcoin exchanges and certain Bitcoin businesses that are working to become money transmitters. So if ultimately you had to be one, that it would tend, I think, towards some more centralization of the Lightning network, but it could still be a really fantastic technology for example, reducing the cost of transmissions and transfers between exchanges, and in sort of the backbone of the Bitcoin network. And considering how much traffic right now, I don't know how much of each block is inter-exchange traffic by most estimates. I think that would do considerably well. Again, I would hope it wouldn't come to that. And then also Bitcoin isn't just used in the United States. So while some other countries have their own money transmission licenses, I think development would continue, and I would expect that these other countries would surge ahead maybe in sort of their Bitcoin usage. And yeah, ultimately, I mean, it's certainly difficult to enforce and not completely unenforceable. But ultimately, I don't think it would. I don't think we're prevented from happening. And I just you count me as surprised if that turns out to be a scenario.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're not too worried about it. It sounds like it doesn't really play an effect here because of what the actual nodes are doing, right? They're not necessarily transmitting money, right? They're simply going from peer to peer, sending encrypted messages from peer to peer. Does that sound right?
That's right. And in fact, so FinCEN, for example, has held that Bitcoin miners are not money transmitters, which was not necessarily that was not necessarily like a perfectly preordained outcome. It was similar to this, where you'd say, oh, maybe they would try to classify them under this definition. I think for similar reasons, yeah, and miners, the decentralization of miners played a role in that decision. And whereas centralized virtual currency administrators are considered money transmitters under that ruling. And yeah, I think the decentralization of the Lightning network, all these factors will come in play. And my prediction would be that they won't. Some states, there's some different regulation in different states. Other countries may, outside of the U.S., may have to do that. But lawyers hate to go on the record with predictions like this, but I would personally be surprised.
Yeah. I mean, of course, we're not asking, for your exact prediction, Dan. I have to agree with you. I don't think that it's going to be, much of an issue at all. Does anybody else have anything to comment on this before we move ahead to the next topic?
Yeah, I was just going to say. Sorry, I was just going to say I don't think it's going to be an issue. And I'm not an attorney, but I've worked with a lot of regulated stuff around tech before, and generally all the regulations are kind of written to be technology agnostic, right? It's all written around sort of use. And so they would talk about things like whether you have custody of somebody's funds and, those sort of things. And, whether a channel is encrypted or not, they're usually not that detailed. And I haven't read the specific ones that we're supposedly worried about, but it certainly wouldn't be KYC and AML, because that's all about the registration process. That's all about knowing who you're doing business with, right? And it doesn't get any worse on a Lightning channel than it is on Bitcoin, because those addresses are randomly generated. So if I'm sending funds out or I'm receiving funds as Coinbase, I'm completely relying on the user registration process for that. So I really don't see that changing at all. The only other thing I would say is that if it is a gray area, these sort of things are a lot more political than I think most people think. And there's a lot of lobbying and things like that going on. And I could see on one side, somebody like Coinbase's business being certainly impacted, Visa's business. But then on the other side, there's just so many people, for example, Zappos, when they sell a pair of shoes for $50, they have about $5 in cost associated with credit cards because of the number of returns and the number of purchases where they don't get any money. That works out to be a pretty significant portion of their business. And I think there's going to be just too many people that see, somebody like Zappos again, their profit margin is going to more than double if they can sell a pair of shoes and not have $5 in built-in credit card fraud. So I think the amount of support and desire is going to be overwhelming if there's any sort of political question.
Yeah, absolutely. Great points. Let's go with Dr. Russell. I believe you had something to say too.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are focusing too much on the technical details of how Lightning is implemented in order to determine its legal interpretation. And based on my what I've seen in the past, like when it comes to legal interpretation, they don't really care about the technical details. There was some satellite receiver company, and I believe it was in New York, that want to sort of skirt around the law by having an array of little tiny satellite receivers, and then have each individual subscriber own one of them and cache their recordings on a hard drive. And as I recall, the legal interpretation would have none of it. They're not interested in technical circumventions of the law. So they're going to decide it, whether it's, they're going to decide it independently of the implementation details of Lightning, I think.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. I mean, they're just like JW even said, all the wording is around custodial things, around account creation and holding data and all these things. It's nothing to do with what's actually happening on the Lightning node, which again is basically just sending encrypted messages from peer to peer without any knowledge of where they're actually going or where they came from. So there's just no way to regulate that, in the money world right now. So it'll be really interesting to see how this plays out down the line. But again, it doesn't sound like any of my panelists are very worried. I myself, again, am not very worried either on this particular topic. So, all right, I think we can move on to the next one. Before we do that, guys, just ask you to please give us a thumbs up if you like what you're seeing here. We really appreciate it because it allows us to get into more people's feeds, allows us to show up in more people's YouTube channel. And if you're new, guys, please hit the subscribe button, subscribe to the World Crypto Network. We now are over 50,000 followers, 50,000 subscribers, and we really appreciate it. We have a bunch of content that we're doing here. We have, of course, my show, and Thomas is now doing the Bitcoin Talk Show where he's taking people's questions and answers. So that's been really great. And of course, the morning show as well. So we got a lot of content on there. Really appreciate it if you guys want to subscribe and give us a thumbs up. We got a lot more stuff coming up. So let's move on to the next topic here. This one's pretty interesting. Robinhood, the big, huge company over there and on Wall Street, the trading company, announced that they are actually going to allow crypto trading. And they did it in a very interesting way. The marketing that they used, I believe even Block Digest discussed this a little bit. So maybe we'll go with JW after Russell on this. But yeah, it's really interesting how they tried to market traders where they're talking about 24/7, right? Never sleep. Never sleep, just trade. And so I'm curious to see what Russell, what do you think about Robinhood launching the ability to do crypto trading? And is this just is this just a sign to come of what's to come, or is every single company now just going to integrate crypto? Anything to do with trading?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're just going to see more of this in the future, right? I mean, Bitcoin and maybe a couple of the currencies are number one when it comes to cryptocurrencies, and I think this is just more of the same that we've seen in the past. And and more that we'll see in the future.
Yep, it doesn't short and sweet there, Russell. It doesn't seem like this is going to be going away anytime soon. Do you do any trading, Russell, or do you just program 24/7?
Yeah, no, I don't really focus on the Bitcoin markets. I have learned that I'm not a day trader, so I don't even try anymore.
Yeah, same with me. I tried that, didn't work out so well. So I'm a buy and hodler kind of guy. I've been hodling for some time now. So let's ask JW on this subject. You guys definitely spoke a bit about it on Block Digest. And what are your comments on this? Is this just a sign to come? Is everybody going to integrate crypto into their business model at some point? Or and then what are your thoughts on the marketing as well?
Yeah, I think we're talking about the stuff that's going on in Davos, right?
So we're talking about the Robinhood announcing the Robinhood app.
Sorry,
no,
guys.
I did announce Davos in the beginning, but maybe we can get your comments on that as well after the Robinhood comments.
Yeah. So I think the Robinhood stuff is amazing, right? I think it's incredible. Anytime somebody turns on anything related to Bitcoin, the response is, if any of us were to say what we hoped it would be, it's going to be bigger than that, probably by an order of 10 or 100 times. So there's just an incredible amount of pent up demand. The way that I feel about Bitcoin right now is that it's got a certain price, but that it's basically like a restaurant where there's a line around the door, right? There's so much demand for it at the current price that none of the exchanges, none of the people that are selling it can sell it fast enough. And the only way to deal with that is to raise the price, right? As more people come in. So I'm very, very positive on it. I think the stuff at Davos is, the sort of fear mongering stuff that it's all going to get regulated. I think that's going to continue for a while. But, once we have our first couple crypto trillionaires, I think that stuff is going to quietly go away. And it's going to turn out that the political force actually shifts in our favor, if it hasn't already. But I think we'll see that in the next few years. And that'll be an interesting tipping point also.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we've seen mostly light touch regulation in all the first world countries. Obviously, in things like Argentina, in countries like Argentina and others, even Venezuela, they're much harsher, right? But that's because of the fiat system is collapsing over there. But we haven't seen too harsh a regulation around the world. Europe and America and Australia and things like that. In Canada, of course, especially. So it's very positive outlook. And I think, as you mentioned, JW, once more and more wealthy Bitcoiners become more and more wealthy, they will be able to have more and more influence. So very much looking forward to that. Let's ask Daniel, what do you think about this, Daniel, about Robinhood? Do you do much trading yourself? And what do you think about this news about kind of crypto trading going mainstream now with this?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I think it's actually maybe most notable to sort of put it in the context of the same week, maybe it was this week, of Stripe deciding to stop supporting Bitcoin. Which is sort of interesting that I think it was a couple of years ago that you saw sort of a wave of payment companies adopting Bitcoin and starting to support Bitcoin. And now, as you start to see, like the companies that are starting to support it now are investment companies. And I think this is sort of a big a reflection of the shift in sort of the popular value thesis for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies from a means of exchange to a store of value. And Bitcoin primarily being something that you happily can just buy and hodl and without sort of spending or without sending anyone. As I understand it, I think I haven't looked that closely into it, but I think Robinhood may not even support either sending. Certainly, I think sending cryptocurrencies. They're not planning to support sending it to other users or even withdrawing it, as far as I understand. And while in some ways I think that's that might be kind of anathema to a lot of people sort of who believe in holding your own private keys. I think as far as people who are looking for exposure but trust certain elements of the existing system, I think it's it sort of makes sense. Some people may prefer to hold it on Robinhood. I think as we talked about last time, I hold most of my again, I'm going to get hacked, I'm sure. My phone number is going to get ported, but I hold most of my crypto on Coinbase just because again I would rather have a professional custodian, which is maybe slightly damning, but for a certain class of people, I think people ultimately people want to invest in Bitcoin right now. People want to invest in cryptocurrencies. People don't particularly want to spend it or send it as much right now, and so I think this is why you see the payment companies going away and these investment companies coming in. And I think it's generally great and sort of exciting thing right now.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, it is seemed that the trading industry is really swooping in here to crypto now that the payments industry kind of, for the most part, kind of died down as we've experienced such huge amounts of spam and things on the network. But with Lightning, maybe that can all come back next year. I think a lot of people are going to be looking at Lightning. A lot of the payments companies that maybe left or are still around, they're definitely going to be looking at Lightning, and so maybe all that talk can kind of come back. So looking forward to that. But yeah, it's a very interesting contrast. It seems that a lot of people, it seems like some of the more wealthier people or the hot people with a lot of coin, they do sometimes prefer these custodial services like Zappo and Coinbase, because again, like for example, like Zappos, they bury their stuff pretty far underground. They have some real good experience with physical security. So very interesting things there. All right, let's see. Let's go with Francis here on your thoughts. A bit of a tease, ladies and gentlemen. Francis does have some amazing news that he's going to speak about after he comments on this subject. So a little bit of a tease there. But first, Francis, what are your thoughts on Robinhood now? Is crypto trading going mainstream?
Yeah, so really insightful comments by Dan. I'm just going to build on that a little bit. So one of the reasons why I think some of the businesses that are accepting Bitcoin or using some kind of Bitcoin payment processing are some of them are announcing that they're moving off of Bitcoin. Yes, there's the idea that people the hodler mentality is kind of settling in, but I'll just add that a lot of them were also just based off of BitPay's stack. And they were just using BitPay in the backend, and BitPay is just really just an awful service right now. So that's been hurting a lot of the startups that I know that were just integrating BitPay. And regarding Robinhood, I mean, I think that's great news. And I don't know of any company that's doing fintech or that has an e-wallet or that has some kind of service to facilitate investing that wouldn't want to integrate Bitcoin. I mean, in Canada, a company is called Mogo. They're kind of like Venmo. They're kind of like all those apps where you kind of connect your bank and you load up your wallet and you have all the. Of course, they integrated. They're integrating the buy and sell Bitcoin buttons within the app, right? I think this is just going to become increasingly common in the future. As we said, the appetite for exposure to cryptocurrency is insanely. It's insane. It's enormous. It's overwhelming. You've got exchanges that are literally shutting down registrations. Like, when does that happen? There's too much customers. We don't want more. There's just too many clients, and they just can't handle it. Regarding the custodianship, of course, this is always the main issue to adoption. Key management policies, client-side security, all that kind of stuff. So in terms of custody, of course, there's this huge demand for having these services that are custodial, and I definitely understand why one might want to do that. And what's really truly important is that people that do want to have self-sovereignty completely, both on the key side and on the blockchain validation side, they can, right? So I don't see that as a problem. So as you said, I'm gonna hijack the show now for my special announcements. It's actually quite related to what we're talking about. So I'm really, really happy to announce that the first ever cryptocurrency fund has been approved by the Ontario Securities Commission on Friday afternoon in Canada. So this is a mutual fund that will be sold to all Canadian accredited investors. And this means that it can be bought into a RSP, retirement savings plan. It can be bought by family offices, by brokers, by the teachers' pension funds, and all those nice folks that may want to get exposure to crypto. The fund itself is, unfortunately, it's not just Bitcoin. It's 50% Bitcoin, 35% Ethereum, and 15% Litecoin. So I've been advising, so the fund is launched by a company called 3iQ. It's a Canadian company, 3iq.ca. I've been advising them for about a year and a half. And I can tell you it's been a really long and really arduous road to finally be able to have a regulated financial product for Bitcoin and crypto in Canada. We've been, but the market demand and the kind of vision of having this financial instruments that allow the regular investor to get exposure to crypto is so huge. We got a lot of help from you guys like Chris Benitsky back in the day. A lot of the Bitcoin people really are super involved in this. So this is really wonderful news. And the best part is that 3iQ is trying to offer other products. So the mutual fund is not publicly tradable on an exchange. It's like a mutual fund trust. But we are working really, really hard. And that wasn't even our main product. Actually, our main product is a market traded financial instrument, which is taking more time to get the approval. But yeah, so this is probably, I think, the biggest news regarding financial markets and crypto in Canada so far.
That's amazing, man. Yeah, so I was just going to ask the people that can buy into this. Did you say they have to be accredited investors? But if they have a pension fund, then their pension fund can invest, or can a teacher actually buy this mutual fund, or do they have to have it done by the accredited investor that manages their pension?
So I'm not totally sure, because my role there is really I'm on the independent advisory committee. So I've been advising them on basically the same kind of stuff that I talk about on this show every week. That's more my role over there. But from what I understand, you have to be an accredited investor to buy into that. So like the general public can't go buy that, I think, directly. But the idea is that, yes, it's meant to be bought up by funds and like I guess brokers and groups. Ultimately, I don't think it's only for the 1%, right? I think people that have money under management throughout through different intermediaries, mom and pops, they can probably go pressure whoever's managing their funds to buy some of those shares of the mutual funds to get that exposure to crypto. And the custodianship is by Coinbase, which is also why it's Bitcoin, Ether, and Litecoin.
Yeah, very cool. Well, I mean, that's incredible news. I think one of the things that I always forget is how few people can actually invest in this stuff right now. It's maybe 99% of all the dollars that people have in savings, it's just not even physically possible, right? The regulations prevent them from being able to make that investment, and these sort of moves can be pretty incredible. And it's definitely on a path that's exciting to me.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be. I think it's gonna be great for a lot of people. Always ask me, can I put that in my our RSPs? And this is hugely tax beneficial, by the way. I mean, there's like insane tax savings of putting that into your retirement savings plan. So that's good. That's good if you're bullish on Bitcoin and crypto, actually, because you save on the gains, but you can't capitalize those capital losses elsewhere. So this is really good if you're bullish, actually.
Very, very cool. Does anybody else have any other things to comment on either Francis's news or this topic? Nope. Okay, very cool. All right, so that's some pretty awesome breaking news you guys heard right here on the World Crypto Network, right here on the Bitcoin News Show. Thanks so much, Francis, for letting everybody know. Absolutely exciting times. I mean, so many financial products are going to come out this year. I think it's really going to take everybody surprised because, like you guys say, there's just not a whole lot of easy ways for people to be able to get exposure to crypto, to Bitcoin. It's really early days, so I'm really excited to see more and more of these things come out. Really awesome to see the ability for more and more people to get their hands on crypto. So very cool, Francis. Thank you so much for that. I think we can move on to our second to last topic here. The Weiss ratings. Very interesting kind of thing came out this week about the Weiss ratings decided to put out a ratings for cryptocurrencies, and it's pretty interesting. I have the links, of course, guys, in the show notes, so check that out. But they had some pretty interesting results, so I'm curious to see what everybody thinks about here. Especially, probably the most interesting thing was rating Cardano a B- and Bitcoin a C+. So let's see what Dr. Russell has to say on this. Russell, what is your what is your opinion on the Weiss ratings, and then Wall Street just trying to rate crypto in general?
Yeah, well, like obviously, I would rank these cryptocurrencies in a different order than they would. And look, I'm not in a certain sense, I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist, right? And for the last 7 or 8 years, I've been waiting for the better Bitcoin to come out. And yet, in all of this time, somehow people have always managed to make worse implementations of the cryptocurrency concept than Bitcoin. Bitcoin is still, as far as I can tell, one of the only, or if or maybe the only one, where there's a focus on providing financial sovereignty to the individual. Because if you're going to have governance, then you're just going to be trading one set of bankers for another set of bankers, and you're really not making any progress. And also in the meantime, over those like 7 or 8 years, we've understood Bitcoin a lot better. There are new techniques for new soft forks, right? And we've witnessed many very important upgrades that have enabled the Lightning Network to come to fruition. And I'm even more confident that it's not even necessary to make the better Bitcoin anymore. Bitcoin can transform itself into the better Bitcoin, right? So I don't understand, Cardano is not very well battle tested yet, and there's maybe some potential there. I'm not so certain, but like I say, the Bitcoin is the only one that provides the fundamental basis of providing individual financial sovereignty, right? No one else comes close. No one comes close to the liquidity and the size of the market for Bitcoin and the most battle tested, hardened code based. So I don't quite know what they're thinking over there.
Pretty strange stuff. I mean, we've definitely very experienced with Weiss ratings. If you guys have ever seen the Big Short, highly recommend you check out that movie and find out how great their integrity really is. Let's go with Daniel on this subject. Daniel, what did you think about these ratings coming out? And is this something we're going to see more of in the future? Are more ratings companies going to be continuously putting out more crypto ratings? What do you think?
Sure. So I mean, these ratings seem a little bit silly, just in that it isn't like right now there are any institutional investors whose mandates require that they only buy cryptocurrencies with a Weiss cryptocurrency rating or or B or higher. And in fact, that, as I understand it, was essentially one of the major drivers of the importance of ratings agencies like Moody's and Fitch and S&P is these sort of institutional barriers to investing, and one's lower than that. So there isn't necessarily any reason to look at them as more than just sort of any kind of analyst ratings. But I think seeing them come in and seeing just in general, I think Wall Street analysts starting to take a serious look at cryptocurrencies and sort of how to rate them will just be great. I think it's probably bullish for the space, and also I think it's just great for, none of us really do understand how to do evaluation of any cryptocurrency. It's not really something that that classical analysis method sort of really gives you much on. So I think just anything pushing forward that kind of modeling is useful and interesting.
Yeah, it's very, I mean, if they would share more information, I guess, about how they became with those ratings, maybe it would be, for me, a little bit more interesting, but they really don't. I mean, people like Bruce Fenton and others are trying to figure this out as well, trying to figure out a way to come up with a system, to be able to evaluate both these ICOs and just crypto projects in general. So very interesting. Another good point is, to me, it seems like it's just a sign of maturity for the space in general, is that it is maturing. Now, I want to be careful to say not legitimacy, right? Because in our minds, of course, crypto and Bitcoin is legitimate no matter what. We don't need a government stamp of approval to tell us that it's legitimate, but it is interesting to see that it is a sign of the space itself maturing and growing as more and more people become aware of this, become aware of crypto and things like that. So very interesting. Let's go with JW next. JW, what do you think about these ratings? Is this a sign of maturity? Is this a sign of things to come?
Yeah, actually, I think the interesting thing for people in Bitcoin that have some expertise in Bitcoin, seeing the folks from the traditional financial markets move in, is they start to see things that that they wouldn't expect, and that's essentially that the traditional financial markets are so incompetent. They have no idea what they're doing. If you look at the average stockbroker, he performs worse than the S&P 500. That means he's worse than random chance. And this is the vast majority of these guys, right? So I think that's the main thing that's shocking, is just seeing when you have expertise and you see the mainstream media, you're not going to watch CNBC anymore and believe what's going on in Yemen after you've seen the way that they've dealt with Ripple, right? So I think that's the main shocker. It did inspire me to create my own rating system. And I tried to be as objective about it as I could and just say, these are the claims that are on the website, and this is my technical understanding of whether those claims are true or false, and try to be as impartial as possible. If you guys are interested, my Twitter profile, it's pinned. It's Weatherman I am. And if you see any errors, let me know, because I am trying to be totally transparent and update corrections. I've already had to fix a few things where my understanding was wrong. But I think that's a bare minimum, right? If you want to believe somebody, you got to at least see how they did the math.
Absolutely, absolutely. And definitely, guys, I'll have everybody's Twitter accounts, of course, in the show notes once the show is over. So definitely check that out. Feel free. Everybody needs to follow everybody here, except for, of course, Dr. Russell, who doesn't seem to have a Twitter account. But thank God, because who knows if Russell would get anything done. We need simplicity to get done, Russell. So definitely don't get on Twitter just yet. Let's go with Francis next. Francis, what do you think about these Weiss cryptocurrency ratings, man? And the discussion so far?
Yeah, well, to some degree, I understand why the demand and for having these frameworks of analysis for all these different coins, because you don't have time. We don't have time. There's the top 20 coins change all the time. This thing is insane. There's all this noise coming at you, and everybody wants to see the signal. Everyone wants to see the fundamentals, and they're trying to figure it out. And the thing that I've realized is that Bitcoin and crypto, all of that, is really hard to teach. It's kind of something you have to learn over time, and people are looking reasonably for these shortcuts, right? However, regarding the Weiss ratings themselves, their results completely discredit their methodology, which I would love to look at it, but in no way, shape, or form can they arrive at such results with any kind of reasonable methodology. And it's kind of weird because, as you say, I see those people coming from finance, and they're so helpless in the sense that they're just trying to get those old mental models to fit on Bitcoin. And when they're doing these analysts, right, they have no understanding at all where the value of these coins come from and what these things are, which is that they are network effects. They are living, breathing network effects. So I've seen this so many times. They'll just kind of lay out all the white papers like on a table, and they'll be like, oh, so this one's a really good market for IoT. This one's IoT is a growing market, and our Google searches see that IoT automation with micropayments is super hot. This one is blah 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 whatever. Ripple is the banking sector, fintech sector that's so hot right now. So they'll kind of like analyze those things completely out of context, and they're giving like financial advice, right? So their financial rating agency, they're giving financial advice to people looking at those coins. I don't know if we mentioned that Bitcoin got a C+ and Cardano got a B-, and all those kinds of crazy ratings like that. So what they fundamentally misunderstand is that the value of the token isn't like magically imbued by the tech prospect of whatever white paper or whatever software you're using. The value of your token, relative to obviously its scarcity, is based on not only actual demand, but holders that will hold it, right? Because if you're just buying IOTA to pay for some automation and someone's reselling it on the other end all the time, the value of these things don't increase. They're not good investments, right? Some people need to not sell or have some future expected utility for themselves, have a long-time preference over them, which, as we know, holding your crypto is something that's really special. It's really hard. You can feel it because of the multiple interconnected network effects of Bitcoin. You feel like, people will not panic sell and it's not going to go to zero, and there's promise of that thing because there's everybody around. They don't reflect that in those ratings, which is the fundamental, when you look at the long-term fundamental value of a coin, that's it. They don't seem to give much attention to the fairness of the distribution of the coins. There's also some metrics that they're not taking into account. And I think this is just, kind of CNBC style reporting, headline grab style importing. I'm pretty sure BuzzFeed is gonna, start to say the top 10 cryptos you should be going out after right now, and there's gonna be Potcoin in there because the pot market is so hot right now, and it's gonna be that kind of stuff. So it's not. I'm not. I don't think this is good advice. I think it's misleading to a lot of people, and it's an intellectual shortcut that sells well.
Yep. I mean, we've seen CNBC post a few coins. I saw this going around Twitter, how they posted a few coins that were supposed to be big, and one of them was Potcoin. So you actually nailed it, Francis, right on the head.
Are you serious?
You can Google it. It was I went to Twitter, and
it was Potcoin, it was Panda Coin, and it was
Potcoin's from Montreal. I know Potcoin. If only anybody knew what was that was. Like, I don't want to talk about that. But
we won't talk about that.
Insane,
dude. I promise you, it's not worse than Panda Coin, right? It was in good company.
Right.
What was the third one, JW? What was the third one?
I can't remember, man. It was Potcoin, Panda Coin. I'm pretty sure it was another animal, like kitty coin or something.
It was bad, dude. It was really bad. So yeah, please, people, do not take investment advice from freaking from CNBC. It's not a good idea, and we definitely need to get to our last topic here. But yeah, that's just crazy. This is really an example of, in my opinion, the old system clashing up with this new system, right? This is the example of crypto clashing up and challenging the system as it is. And, with the track record that it has, they just have no feet to stand on, no ground to stand on with their past that they've had, rating everything from other stocks to mortgage-backed securities and on and on and on. It's a horrible system. I believe that we will find something much better. And again, guys, let's just keep it simple, right? Hold Bitcoin, and you'll have no problems, I assure you. So let's go ahead and move on to the final topic then, which is simplicity. Very, 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 very exciting stuff, you guys, coming down the pipe with Bitcoin. Again, there's so many things coming out. We got Mast, we got Schnorr, SegWit is now at record percentages. And of course, we have things like simplicity on the way. So Dr. Russell, if you want to, maybe just, I have a couple questions for you here about it, and then we'll go with the other panelists. But first, let me ask you, Russell, how did simplicity kind of come to be? And, what was your thinking of it? What was the end goals for it? And we'll start with that.
Oh, actually, I guess the origins of simplicity go back a long time, back to 2011, when I was first studying Bitcoin. And I was on the Bitcoin IRC channel. I was talking with Peter Willa at the time. And then we were learning about the Bitcoin script system, or at least I was. And I started thinking, we're wasting a bunch of space here because we have to have all these branches that are exposed when we do payments, and some of this code never gets executed in the first place. So we were talking. This was about the time that push to script hash was going on, and I was trying to think of a new design that wasn't a linear scripting program, but was a tree structure. And with a tree structure, you have this ability to prune off branches that are unused. But that idea was shelved for a long time until I came to work for Blockstream, and I got to pick it up and think about and really get into the nitty-gritty about how would you design a tree-shaped language that would enable pruning and reduce space and increase privacy. And so that was sort of the birth of the genesis of simplicity.
And the reason for this, for all this complexity is the same thing as ours, right? I mean, to make sure that it scales and to make sure that it stays decentralized and censorship resistant. Is that correct?
That's right. And so we also want to avoid falling into the snark trap. Snarks are this mathematical construction that you like constant time verification of arbitrary programs, but it's very complicated and requires a trusted setup, right? So you don't want to fall into the trap where you're going to use this technique called snarks to solve everything. So this is a little bit more practical, I think, down to earth, something that we can really start to implement in the near future.
Okay, and just maybe we should have started with this, but maybe if you could just give your quick general overview, being as non-technical as you can, about what simplicity really is and the benefits that you think it will bring in the coming years.
Right. So I describe simplicity as a native Mast language, and Mast stands for Merkleized Abstract Syntax Tree. That's not important. The important thing is it enables this pruning that I was telling you about to remove branches that you don't actually need to execute at redemption time. And so it's a combinator language. I don't want to go into too much details. It's got this tree structure which enables pruning. And the basic idea was I wanted to come up with a consensus language. This simplicity is executed by the consensus protocol, so it needs to be very simple because when you have complicated consensus rules, you're going to have different implementations that go out of consensus. We've seen this in other crypto coins before, where when you just have a text description of what's what's going on. People misinterpret that text and have disagreements about what's supposed to go on. But agreement is very important. So very simple language that people can come to consensus very easily with about its semantics, so that we know what the program's going to do. And something very general, so that I'm not, restricting ourselves to particular operations or something like that. And is flexible enough to support, arbitrary designs that people might come up with in the future, right? So Bitcoin script had a lot of operations that were disabled in 2010, because I think it's a little bit unclear. Satoshi just said misc changes in his changelog. He was all like that when he was making significant protocol changes, right? But I think he came to the understanding that some of these operations could be abused, and he sort of took a broad hatchet to removing things. So even like integer multiplication was on the chopping block there, right? And so we have integer addition in Bitcoin script, but not integer multiplication, and that's very restrictive, right? So I wanted a very simple language, something that would be flexible enough to support things that I can't even think about that people might want to do in the future, and support what's very important, static analysis, so that people can determine the computational costs of running simplicity upfront, right? And so you don't want to be in the position where you run out of gas and your contract is stuck forever and now you've lost all your money, right? So with simplicity, we have a universal static analysis algorithm that determines the computational costs of executing a simplicity program in any context whatsoever, right? So when you enter your smart contract with your counterparty, you'll know upfront what the weight, what the computational costs are going to be at most when it comes time to do redemption.
Very, very cool. So some very important points in there. This really is an advancement over the current Bitcoin script. So this is going to allow for a lot more things that we can do than we currently can do with Bitcoin scripts, and that includes things like getting really nitty gritty with MAST, right? Doing these more advanced smart contracts with a lot more advanced things that you can do with just smart contracts, rather than just hold funds in an escrow for me and another person, right? There's much more things you can do, and a very important point is that this is not Turing complete. It does have that universal static analysis that you mentioned, where we can actually determine the cost of a program that we run. Imagine that. Ethereum people everywhere are going like, no way. But yes, you don't have to worry about gas or other things like that, because again, you don't have to worry about things happening that you can't program for, right? So this is not endless loops. There is no loops, so to speak. So this is another final important point is that this is a consensus level language. So what that means is that this is very, very primitive. So people will write, for example, you can write a JavaScript program, JavaScript API over the top of this. And so you can, for example, target JavaScript developers. There will be simplistic programming languages built on top of simplicity that allows for regular developers to be able to, in their own ecosystem, work with simplicity. And again, everything that's compatible with simplicity then means it's compatible with everything with Bitcoin across. So Bitcoin, MAST, right, Schnorr, all of this amazing stuff. And so that's really, really important to take away, that this is the next level of programming for Bitcoin. And again, another kind of Bitcoin 2.0 thing, right? Like Lightning kind of represents Bitcoin 2.0. And in my opinion, this really represents Bitcoin 2.0. This is going to allow for amazing development that can happen. And in fact, I believe we'll talk to Dan next. I believe that Dan is going to eventually integrate this kind of stuff into his IDE that is Ivy. And so maybe Dan can talk a little bit about that. So Dan, what are your thoughts so far on simplicity, and what is your plans to maybe integrate this into Ivy at some point?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think simplicity is a really brilliant language, not just as a blockchain language, but also just sort of a really neat development in just virtual machines and functional programming in general. So I wrote a blog post actually. If you Google my name and simplicity, hopefully it'll come up. I'm not sure. Maybe on Medium. Maybe so. Vertex can put it in the show notes maybe later. But that's implementing sort of a small piece of simplicity in Haskell. So if anyone wants to sort of try out simplicity, to either see a little bit more about how it works or try it out, you can do that. And there's a REPL, an online REPL for simplicity that's built using that code that you can also, so you can just try out some simple simplicity programs. But yes, I think the certainly a long-term goal and something we talked about with Russell and he mentioned in the paper would be compiling Ivy, which is a high-level language that currently compiles to Bitcoin script to simplicity. To make it easier to for somebody to use it, because simplicity is a low-level bytecode language, lower level, by far even than something like the EVM, the Ethereum virtual machine, and quite intentionally so. So what excites me most, I think, about simplicity is the generality that you mentioned. It's not Turing complete, but it's what's called Weiss finitarily complete or functionally complete. So it allows you to do relatively efficiently essentially anything that you any sort of function from transactions to like just a decision on whether it's valid or not that you want. And so that means that right now it's really hard to get a new opcode in often to Bitcoin, and there's a lot of byte shedding that goes around that. And so certain extensions that could support something like improvements to Lightning don't happen. And simplicity would allow you to route around that by just implementing it yourself in this low-level combinator language, or by adding what's called a jet to it to allow you to do something more efficiently. And one cool thing about that is that you could conceivably, because the language is statically analyzable and formally verifiable, you could do something. You could provide along with a BIF to add this particular jet, sort of like adding a new opcode to Bitcoin script. Right now, you could add a proof that it is valid and that your implementation of it actually implements it. And so I think that would just be great for moving Bitcoin forward. If every time someone had a change to this, they could even come along with a total proof that this won't mess up the consensus or won't be too inefficient or anything like that. So I think that's just a really neat possibility, and that would just sort of allow us to really go much further with simplicity than we currently can with Bitcoin script and just moving along ad hoc with sort of increasing outcomes.
Yeah, I think my favorite point there, Dan, was that, this using simplicity, once everybody is, using simplicity, you could just be guaranteed to not mess something up in the blockchain, right? We won't have CryptoKitty issues. We won't have ICO issues where the whole blockchain just stops or slows down considerably with that type of thing, because again, we're not Turing complete, right? So everything is able to be calculated and thought of beforehand. So very interesting stuff. Dan, so what you're saying is you have Ivy right now, which is this higher level language that actually compiles down to Bitcoin script. Does this mean that Ivy will eventually be able to compile down to simplicity and then Bitcoin script, right? So it goes Ivy, simplicity, and then Bitcoin script, right?
Well, so simplicity would replace Bitcoin script.
Oh yeah, that's right. So Ivy
right now compiles to Bitcoin script. This would be compiling directly from Ivy to simplicity. And yeah, I think once Russell releases the SDK for that, which I don't want to put too much pressure on him to do so quickly because he's a guy who does things right. But I think once that comes out, that's certainly going to be like top of the list of my projects, because I think it would be really great to do that. It'd be a fun project, and I think it'll maybe help push simplicity through and try to make it something real on Bitcoin.
Awesome, yeah, and I think a really good point to add is that this is really going to, I think, kickstart huge amounts of development over Bitcoin, because remember, protocol development is very, very, very difficult, very, very specialized, as opposed to app development, right? Anybody can make a JavaScript app on a web or iPhone app, but protocol development very, 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 very specific, very specialized. And I think that with the release of simplicity and then languages on top of it like Ivy, I think that'll just bring a whole slew of developers into Bitcoin and to be able to develop Bitcoin applications, because it'll be so much easier, it'll be so much straightforward. Because right now it's really not. I mean, to understand Bitcoin script, the fact that a transaction is a script, it's counterintuitive to your standard app development process. And so I think that this is going to bring a lot more development into Bitcoin once this low level stuff is completed. So very, very cool. Again, guys, this is like the next generation of Bitcoin script. This is going to be the next generation of Bitcoin. So very, very amazing stuff. Let's go to Francis. Actually, let's go to JW first, then Francis. JW, what are your thoughts so far on the discussion and simplicity and maybe simplicity bringing in more and more development?
Yeah, I love this stuff. I feel like this is the sort of stuff where I'm going to look back on 10 years and go, I can't believe I was hanging out and talking with Russell when he announced that he was releasing this. Like, this is like lightning, right? These are the sort of things that have massive impact, and they're they take years to develop, right? Like we couldn't just throw something together I as a security guy, I absolutely feel bad for the company Deja Vu Security that was responsible for trying to review the DAO, right, and sign off on that thing, because we all know now in hindsight, yeah, maybe a completely unlimited application programming environment isn't the easiest thing to predict and secure, right? So doing this work, even though it takes years, is the stuff that's amazing, and I think, I'm sure that he feels some pressure to get this done, and I'm sure that there's going to be much bigger implications than I think of right now. But for me, stuff like this and Lightning, as long as we're ahead of adoption of holders, then we're fine, right? Because we don't really need to be able to move Bitcoin around right now unless you're sending it to somebody that already owns it. Maybe this is a little bit different and there's going to be some applications right now, but really this is a couple decade sort of revolution that's happening, and these are the fundamental things that matter, not all the hype.
Absolutely. And just such an important point, guys. Look, there's a whole lot of hype around things, around blockchain, around Ethereum. You can go to any conference and just see all of these guys pitching you things. But look, there's people like Dr. Russell here who are doing the hard work that takes years, the actual protocol development stuff, the stuff that takes years to make sure that we do not move fast and break things. We celebrate all sorts of different cultures, in this world, but the Bitcoin culture is very, very, very much conservative, to the point to where we do not want to lose people's funds. We want this to be the platform for the world's money going forward, right? Forever, right? For as long as possible. We want to have this be the new monetary system, the new financial system. And these developers will not take, they will make sure, they will take the time that it takes to make sure that this stuff is released. And when it's released, it is robust, it is secure, and it is scalable. And that is very, very important in this type of age. Because remember, guys, there's a million blockchains out there, but none of them are going to be able to scale. Like, none of them can scale. Bitcoin is the only public blockchain that is at scale. Ethereum is getting there, but it's not quite there yet. They do have a lot of transactions on their network, but as we've seen, of course, their transaction cost is rising. And I don't know if anybody's ever tried to sync the Ethereum blockchain, but good luck with that. The optimization in Bitcoin recently has just blown me away. I mean, I can literally sync the Bitcoin blockchain in an hour or two. It used to take me a day to a day and a half just a year and a half ago. So this is just amazing improvements on this type of stuff. And this is the development that doesn't get hype, right? This is the development that doesn't get a big old poster for Vinnie Lingham to sit in front of it and be like, the future. No, this is the real future tech here, guys. So very awesome. This is the real fintech. I want to remind people again, this is the real fintech. This is not FinUX. This is not FinUI. This is fintech. And that's what's really important. So let's go with Francis here. Francis, what are your thoughts so far on the discussion and simplicity, and maybe even a little bit of what I said, how the real development takes time?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very excited to see companies like Chain, but specifically in this case, companies like Blockstream, to really come out and build these things that need to be built. I really like the idea of those private investments in the protocol level, because they benefit the entire ecosystem. And I really want to shout out to Blockstream right now. They're working on Russell is working at Blockstream. He developed Simplicity. Andrew Postura working at Blockstream is doing God knows how many things, but amongst other things, Mimblewimble, you got Bulletproof, Sidechains, Lightning Network, all those things that were like, Bitcoin is the best because it got all those things. A lot of those things ultimately have some Blockstream on them. Some Blockstream people have contributed to that. So I mean, again, thank you very much, Blockstream, for doing all the work that you're doing on that. So talking about simplicity looks really cool from even as a non-programming kind of non-tech but tech-savvy person. I kind of understand how Merkleized abstract syntax trees work, I think, to some degree. If you could kind of, it's basically you have all these conditionalities and all these branches that kind of fall back on each other. I've been explained that's the way it would work on Bitcoin. But one thing that surprised me is you talked about kind of the cost of computation of simplicity. And immediately, in the beginning, I thought that simplicity could be integrated into Bitcoin, kind of as is. But then if we're adding this cost of computation seems like we need some kind of equivalent of gas or something like that. So how does simplicity work like within Bitcoin? Is it just a BIP away from going into Bitcoin? Is it something opt-in? Does it change anything else other than the script, like requiring some new spam token for executing scripts or anything like that? And I understand simplicity is kind of a general kind of language that could be implemented in many blockchains. But is there a specific plan on how that's gonna be rolled out into Bitcoin? And generally, also, like, how do you see that getting adopted into Bitcoin? Is it on the menu even? Is it something we should be looking out for, or is it just too early to know?
Yeah, well, I can answer it sort of this way. I mean, simplicity is designed from a design point of view. Simplicity is designed that it could be integrated into Bitcoin, and I mean this in the sense that Bitcoin is the most adversarial environment that you could possibly look for the hardest, most fierce place to try to do this sort of work, right? So if we could design something that will work in Bitcoin, then that same design will more easily work in federated sidechains and maybe some other products that the company might be interested in, right? As far as integration in Bitcoin, that's going to be a long time away from now, right? Because if I took simplicity and said, hey, I want to took it to the Bitcoin development community and say, hey, I want a wholesale replacement of script, they would say, get out of here, right? That's too big of a change, right? So long term, what we need to do is we need to vet it out, right? So we need to vet it out in side chains. We're going to see if we can get it into the Elements project, which is a sidechain platform that Blockstream produces, right? And we'll get some experience with that. And then we'll work on the formal methods side. We're going to prove that the implementation of simplicity meets the semantics. We're going to prove that there's no extra memory that's required beyond what we state on the lid, right? And then maybe, like, if we add the formal methods and the verification and the vetting through sidechains, then we can go back to the Bitcoin dev community. And I think we can get to the point where supporting simplicity has enough evidence behind it, especially the formal verification, that it is even less risky to add simplicity to Bitcoin than some of the other opt-in change proposals. But that's going to take a tremendous amount of work, and that's not going to happen anytime soon. As far as costing goes, right, there's no real problem here. In fact, it works a little bit better than the gas method in Ethereum. It's a little bit in flux exactly how it's going to be defined, but the way I want to do it is, like, the stack analysis. When you receive a transaction that contains a redemption that contains a simplicity program, you can do static analysis over that program. The static analysis is linear time and the size of the program, so it won't take too much time to do the analysis. So this is sort of the pre-analysis before execution. And before execution, you get a bound on the amount of time and the amount of space that's going to be needed for execution, and then you can check that those bounds are not prohibitive. You're going to have some sort of thresholds that prevent people from making spammy simplicity programs, and then you're going to execute it, and then you'll have confidence because of the formal methods that you're not going to exceed the bounds that the static analysis produced, right? And so what's going to happen is that static analysis is going to produce these bounds. Those bounds are going to be translated to a weight factor, right? And then that'll just make transactions heavy, right? So we don't have to measure weight in terms of bytes or virtual bytes or what have you. We can define weight in Bitcoin however we want that respects the computational costs of all aspects of the protocol, right? So that would be the idea there, right? We have this weight factor, and then you can count the total weight of these simplicity programs and ensure that the total block weight is not violated by the weights in terms of size, in terms of time, and in terms of memory of all the programs that are executing. And this would never replace Bitcoin script, right? Because we have all these commitments to Bitcoin script. We can't get rid of Bitcoin script. We have to be able to process in the future. But SegWit added this versioning mechanism that allows us to add new versions script, right? And the new versioning system is so flexible that it doesn't even have to be anything that looks like Bitcoin script. So there's an opportunity, if the time comes and the vetting is done, that we could use the SegWit versioning scheme to soft fork in a simplicity evaluator into the Bitcoin protocol.
Yeah, so can I just ask you a really quick follow-up question on that is, okay, so that was a really, really good explanation. Thank you so much for that. So in thinking about the use cases and trying to imagine what's going to be built on simplicity in a few years, I just have an idea, right? So say that you really do need censorship resistance execution for something. It can be because part of the application you're running needs to have some logic which could be shut down somewhere. It could be something like Liquid, where you have kind of a decentralized settlement, and you want to add some smarter things like futures contracts, all sorts of things. So you could use simplicity kind of in a sidechain and just implement it using whatever consensus kind of rules you like. And for example, the way that the cost of computation is paid for, that's not necessarily, from what I understand, something that's baked in simplicity. It could be implemented in different ways. So using simplicity in a sidechain, people could theoretically build those censorship resistant kind of apps if they really, really need censorship resistance.
I think the key to censorship resistant is to basically make good use of masked Merkle's aspect syntax tree, right? And setting up the incentives properly. So Gregory Maxwell's recent Taproot announcement is very cool. Taproot is sort of this unification between pay to pub key and pay to script hash that makes the two sort of indistinguishable at the commitment level, which is awesome. And so this is what we want to set up. We want to set up a smart contracting system so that when all the participants in the smart contract are cooperating, sort of like the cooperation that occurs in the Lightning Network, then you just do a multi-sig transaction, and this can be turned into a single signature using aggregation, and then you can redeem it on the blockchain. And as long as everyone's cooperating, the entirety of the smart contract gets pruned away from mast, and nobody even sees that there was a smart contract even involved, right? And it's only when people don't cooperate that you can force players to force the outcome to follow the logic that's encoded in the Bitcoin script. And only in those cases where people are not being cooperative, then you have this option to reveal the actual smart contract in simplicity or whatever language, and then go through the logic there to determine who gets how much money, right? But you can also set up a bonding system so that when you go through that uncooperative close, right, people forfeit their bonds for failing to cooperate. So now everyone has an incentive to cooperate, right? And we could probably get to the case where essentially everyone is incentivized to do a cooperative close, right? And there's these smart contracts never ever get revealed on the blockchain. They remain private between the participants, right? And it's in their monetary and privacy. They have preference for doing it this way, right? So we use the blockchain as a judiciary. It sort of acts as a judicial system to arbitrate smart contract behavior. But because it's deterministic, all the participants know in advance what the judgment is going to be, right? So there's no point in trying to appeal to anything, right? They know what the outcome is going to be. So you might as well just cooperate and at least maintain your bond, right? So we'll get to the situation where maybe we're using simplicity and you actually never see any simplicity executed on the blockchain.
Yeah, this is just mind-blowing, actually. So it's kind of like justice upfront, right? You're agreeing when you're making a transaction on all the terms that we're going to agree on for arbitration and dispute resolution. So we got kind of all these things that could be happening, and then we're agreeing in advance on these processes for mediation, and also on the Bitcoin consensus as the ultimate notary and arbiter, doing that upfront, and all the parties, you can't really deny having knowledge of all these conditions, I'm assuming, because if you're transacting using simplicity or sending money to that smart contract, you know in advance what's going to happen. So all that kind of plausible deniability is kind of gone, and it's just So I mean, that's really just from a legal kind of contract point of view. That's pretty cool.
And that's kind of the same model as Lightning, right? Where if everything goes as expected, everything's smooth. But if somebody tries to cheat, they lose a bunch of money, so they just never try to cheat. It's brilliant.
Yeah, and then just a quick question I did have from the audience, just about Lightning Network, because it gets a little confusing. You only have to open up one channel, right? Basically, and then you're just open to the Lightning Network because of the way the routing works. You really only need to ever open up one channel, and it'll just find wherever your destination needs to be. Once Lightning Network gets to be at scale, you only ever have to connect once, I believe. So I just wanted to get that out there as well. But yeah, this simplicity, man, is absolutely amazing. Just like Lightning, I mean, this is what's going to bring Bitcoin into Bitcoin 2.0, and this technology is happening now. And again, this is not superficial development, right? This is not like adding a new feature in Cardano. This is real cryptographic primitives, stuff that's going to stand the test of time, stuff that's going to stand the test of scaling. So very, very awesome stuff, guys. So and guess what? Didn't even have to do an ICO to get this particular technology out of there. And again, made possible because of SegWit, because of all the amazing things in SegWit, specifically the ability to version. That is absolutely amazing. I mean, now that we have SegWit, we can soft fork in anything, people. I mean, I've said this before, but this is just amazing. Now that we have SegWit, we never literally have to hard fork again unless we can find the community consensus to do so, which I do believe we will more than likely find one day down the line. But until then, guys, just amazing stuff. So thanks again so much for joining us. We really, really appreciate it. Just had a lot of mind-blowing discussion here, guys. So if you want to rewind it, definitely, I encourage you to do that. Rewind it, play it back at faster speed so you can hear me talk even faster. Pretty awesome stuff. So I just want to thank our over almost 1,000 viewers throughout the whole entire show. Thanks to everybody in the chat. Thanks so much to our panelists for donating their time. Thank you guys for everybody out there for watching. Let's find out where we can find out more information about our panelists. Mr. Dan Robinson, where can we find more information about you?
Sure. So you can follow me on Twitter at Dan Robinson. And you can also find out more about Ivy, our Bitcoin script programming language, at ivy-lang.org. So that's where you can learn more about and try out Ivy.
I encourage everybody to check that out. Ivy, again, guys, this amazing language that compiles down into Bitcoin script. Very, very cool. And IDE, I encourage you guys to check out our last episode, or maybe it was the one before that, but we definitely had Dan on here. And, Francis had a lot of awesome points about how you can use it, just drag and drop, the primitives, just really, really great stuff. So, guys, I encourage you to check that out. Mr. Francis, where can we find out more about you?
I'm always on Twitter at @FrancisPouliot_, and you can check out my websites catlaxy.com and bylls.com.
Awesome. Mr. JW from BTC Threats, where can we find out more about you?
Yeah, btcthreats.com has the threat model. There's my website, jwweatherman.com, and then I'm at Twitter as weathermanIam.
And of course, you guys can also find him on the Block Digest podcast. That goes almost every day these days. So definitely, guys, check that out. And finally, Mr. Dr. Russell, where can we find out more about your amazing work, sir?
Well, you're going to want to follow Blockstream's blog. You can go to blockstream.com and find our blog from there. Blockstream's Twitter account. You're going to see updates about simplicity when they're ready and as they come out. As far as me, you can't find me very easily. Check out IRC, Freenode, R. O'Connor. I'm on there occasionally if you want to chat.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Russell is old school. You can only find him in various backwater IRC channels, which means you will never be able to find him. So thanks so much, Russell. We really appreciate your information, appreciate your work, and all of Blockstream's work. You guys just doing amazing things over there. Guys, we're going to be back here again, of course, next Sunday. And I just want to quickly mention our audio streams are doing absolutely amazing. Over 2 million views, I think we crossed over. So, guys, you got to check out our audio stream. We have a lot of people in there. We have people like Adam Meister in there, Andy Hoffman. All of our shows are on there. Again, that's you can find this on iTunes or SoundCloud, and those links are of course available on worldcryptonetwork.com. So had a great time, guys. Really appreciate you joining. Until next time, please don't forget, keep talking Bitcoin. We'll talk to you guys later.